Hello, my dear sleepy listener. Welcome to Sleepy Crown, where history's quiet tales gently carry you into dreamland. Tonight, we embark on a peaceful journey through the remarkable life of Captain James Cook, the legendary explorer whose voyages mapped vast regions of our world and forever changed our understanding of the Pacific Ocean. We'll softly explore his humble beginnings in Yorkshire, his rise through the naval ranks, and his three groundbreaking voyages that took him from the icy waters of Antarctica to the tropical shores of Hawaii, all while discovering new lands, peoples, and scientific wonders along the way. Before you drift away into peaceful slumber, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to keep these soothing historical tales coming your way. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Perhaps share which historical voyage you find most fascinating, or maybe a peaceful place you'd like to explore. Don't be shy. Our community is warm and welcoming. So cozy up, close your eyes, and let these gentle whispers from the age of exploration lull you into restful sleep. If you're new here, welcome to the Sleepy Crown family. James, later known as Captain James Cook, was born on October 27th, 1728, in the small village of Marton in Cleveland in Yorkshire, England. His father, James Sr., was a Scottish farm labourer who had moved to Yorkshire for work, while his mother, Grace, lovingly tended to their modest home. The Cook family lived in humble circumstances, their cottage a simple structure with a thatched roof, standing amidst the rolling countryside of northern England. As a young child, James attended the local village school, where he showed a particular aptitude for mathematics. His teacher noticed the bright, attentive boy's quick mind and encouraged his studies whenever possible. When James was about 8 years old, his father was promoted to farm foreman, and the family moved to the nearby village of Great Ayton. There, the landowner, Thomas Scotto, recognized James's intelligence and paid for his education at the village school until he was 12 years old. The Yorkshire countryside where young James grew up was a patchwork of green fields and gentle hills, dotted with small farms and villages. Life followed the rhythm of the seasons, planting in spring, tending crops in summer, harvesting in autumn, and the quiet contemplation of winter. In this rural setting, James developed a strong work ethic and practical approach to problem solving that would serve him well throughout his life. As he entered his teenage years, James worked alongside his father on the farm, learning the value of diligent labor and perseverance. He was a quiet, observant youth, more inclined to watch and learn than to speak without purpose. His neighbors remembered him as reliable and thoughtful, never one to seek attention or make a fuss. The sea was not yet calling to young James. Indeed, the coastline lay some miles away from his inland home. Yet fate has a way of guiding us toward our destiny in the most unexpected ways. For James Cook, the path to becoming one of history's greatest maritime explorers would begin not on the open ocean, but in a small coastal shop. In 1745, at the age of 16, James's life took its first significant turn. His father, recognizing that farming offered limited prospects for advancement, arranged an apprenticeship for his son with William Sanderson, a shopkeeper in the fishing village of Staithes, the small, picturesque coastal community perched on the edge of the North Sea, with fishing boats pulled up on the beach and the salty tang of the ocean in the air. In Staithes, James lived and worked in Sanderson's shop, a general store that served the local fishing community. Here, he helped with accounts, stocked shelves, and assisted customers. More importantly, he had his first meaningful encounter with the sea and the men who made their living upon it. The fishermen who frequented the shop shared tales of distant waters, navigation by stars, and the capricious moods of the ocean. James listened with growing fascination, absorbing their practical knowledge and feeling an increasing pull toward maritime life. For about 18 months, James applied himself diligently to his work at Sanderson's shop. However, it became increasingly clear that his interests lay not with retail trade, but with the beckoning horizon visible from Staithes' windswept cliffs. Legend suggests that after James was accused of stealing a shilling from the till, though the coin had merely slipped through a crack in the counter, the embarrassed young man decided it was time to pursue his growing interest in seafaring. Seeing his apprentice's clear preference for maritime matters, Sanderson did not stand in the young man's way. Instead, he kindly introduced James to his friends, John and Henry Walker, ship owners from the larger port town of Whitby. In 1746, at the age of 18, James Cook began a new apprenticeship that would set him on the course of his life's journey. The Walkers were respected Quaker ship owners who specialized in the coal trade, operating sturdy collier barks that transported coal from Newcastle to London. James was apprenticed as a merchant navy seaman aboard the Freelove, a vessel in the Walker fleet. These coal ships, while not glamorous, provided an excellent education in seamanship. The North Sea's challenging conditions and the difficult navigation along England's eastern coastline demanded skill, resilience, and careful attention to detail, all qualities that James possessed in abundance. Life aboard a collier bark was demanding and often uncomfortable. The crew worked long hours loading and unloading cargo, maintaining the vessel, and navigating in all weather conditions. The quarters were cramped, the food plain, and the work physically taxing. Yet James thrived in this environment, quickly demonstrating an aptitude for navigation and a natural authority that earned the respect of his shipmates. When not at sea, James lived in the Walker family home in Whitby, a bustling port town built around the mouth of the River Esk. The ruined abbey on the cliff top looked down on the town's red-roofed houses and busy harbour. Here, James continued his education, teaching himself algebra, geometry, trigonometry, astronomy, and navigation during the quiet winter months when the ships were laid up. By night, after his shipboard duties were complete, he would study by candlelight, mastering the mathematical principles that underlay the art of navigation. James's dedication impressed the Walkers, who recognized his exceptional abilities. During his apprenticeship, he sailed on various ships in their fleet, gradually taking on more responsibility. He learned the vital skills of coastal pilotage, celestial navigation, and chart-making that would later make him famous. He also absorbed the practical knowledge that comes only from experience, reading weather patterns, understanding tides and currents, and developing the instinct for danger that marks a true seaman. After 3 years of formal apprenticeship, James completed his service in 1749, but continued to work for the Walkers as a seaman. His reputation for competence and reliability grew steadily. He quickly rose through the ranks, serving first as mate, and then, in 1755, being offered command of the Friendship, a collier bark he knew well. For many young seamen, being offered their first ship command was the realization of their highest ambition. It represented security, status, and a respectable career. However, James Cook had begun to envision a different path for himself. Rather than spending his years sailing back and forth along the familiar English coast, he felt drawn to wider horizons and greater challenges. The 7 Years' War between Britain and France had begun, and the Royal Navy offered opportunities for advancement that the merchant service could not match. In a decision that would change the course of history, James Cook declined the Walkers' generous offer of a command. Instead, at the age of 26, he volunteered for service in the Royal Navy as an ordinary seaman. This extraordinary choice, giving up command in the merchant navy to start at the bottom in the naval service, revealed both his ambition and his confidence in his abilities. James Cook believed he was destined for more than the coastal trade, and he was willing to take a significant step backward in order to move forward toward his greater destiny. Thus ended the early chapter of James Cook's life. The farm boy from Yorkshire had transformed himself into a skilled seaman. Through diligent study and practical experience, he had earned the respect of his peers and superiors and demonstrated the qualities that would one day make him one of the greatest explorers in history. Now, as he embarked on his naval career, the wider world awaited him. Oceans to cross, lands to discover, and achievements that would inscribe his name in the annals of exploration forever. In 1755, James Cook joined the Royal Navy, volunteering as an able seaman aboard HMS Eagle, a 60-gun ship of the line. This decision to start anew in a different maritime service might have seemed puzzling to many. Cook had been offered command of a merchant vessel, a position of respect and security, yet he chose instead to begin again at a much lower rank in the naval hierarchy. This choice revealed much about Cook's character, his ambition, his willingness to sacrifice immediate comfort for long-term goals, and his confidence in his own abilities. Life aboard a naval warship differed significantly from the merchant vessels Cook had known. Discipline was stricter, hierarchy more rigid, and conditions often more crowded. The Eagle, commanded by Captain Hugh Palliser, was part of Britain's fleet during the early stages of the 7 Years' War against France. Cook quickly demonstrated his exceptional skills as a seaman, particularly in navigation and chart-making. Captain Palliser, an astute judge of character, recognized Cook's talents and became an important patron to the promising sailor. Cook's first taste of naval action came in November 1755, when the Eagle engaged the French ship Espérance in the English Channel. The battle was brief and one-sided. The French vessel was already in poor condition before the encounter and was quickly battered into submission. Unfortunately, during the short conflict, the Espérance caught fire and could not be saved, denying the British the prize money that would have come from capturing an enemy vessel. Cook's abilities and dedication soon earned him advancement. Just 4 months after joining the Eagle, he was promoted to master's mate, a considerable leap in rank that reflected his superior's high opinion of his skills. This position gave him greater responsibilities in navigation and ship handling, areas where he excelled. His practical experience in the coastal coal trade had given him a thorough understanding of pilotage, wind patterns, and the reading of currents and tides, all invaluable skills in naval service. The gentle rhythm of Cook's days aboard the Eagle fell into a predictable pattern. He would rise before dawn, check the ship's position using his sextant when the skies were clear, and maintain detailed logs of the vessel's course and speed. His careful observations and methodical approach to navigation impressed his officers. In the evenings, while many sailors sought relaxation or sleep, Cook often continued his self-education, studying advanced mathematical texts by the dim light of the ship's lanterns. In 1757, Cook's dedication was rewarded with another promotion, this time to Master of the Solebay, and shortly thereafter, the Pembroke. The position of Master was a critically important one in the Royal Navy. The Master was responsible for the navigation and sailing of the ship, maintaining charts, and advising the captain on the safest and most efficient routes. It was unusual for someone who had not come up through the traditional route of midshipman to attain such a position, especially after such a short time in naval service. Cook's rapid rise testified to both his exceptional abilities and the Navy's recognition of talent regardless of conventional pathways. The 7 Years' War provided Cook with opportunities to apply and expand his skills in new and challenging environments. In 1758, the Pembroke was sent to North America as part of Britain's campaign against the French colonies there. Cook participated in the major amphibious assault on the fortress of Louisbourg in Nova Scotia, a key French stronghold. The successful capture of Louisbourg marked a turning point in the war in North America and gave Cook valuable experience in the complex logistics of naval and military cooperation. It was during this campaign that a pivotal moment in Cook's development occurred. The day after Louisbourg fell, Cook encountered a military officer named Samuel Holland, who was using a plane table to survey the area. The two men discovered a shared interest in cartography and surveying. Holland, impressed by Cook's knowledge and enthusiasm, taught him the advanced surveying techniques he was using. This chance meeting sparked a collaboration that would have far-reaching consequences. Cook and Holland worked together to develop preliminary charts of the entrance to the St. Lawrence River, with Cook likely writing the sailing directions. These charts were crucial for the British fleet's next major objective, the capture of Quebec City, the heart of French power in North America. The St. Lawrence River presented significant navigational challenges, with its strong currents, shifting shoals, and narrow channels. Accurate charts were essential if the British fleet was to navigate safely to Quebec. In the summer of 1759, Cook was given the important task of secretly sounding the channel of the St. Lawrence River at night, taking depth measurements to create accurate charts for the fleet. This dangerous mission required him to work silently under cover of darkness, sometimes within range of French guns. His careful work allowed the British fleet to navigate the treacherous waters safely, leading to the successful siege and capture of Quebec City. This victory, culminating in the famous Battle of the Plains of Abraham, proved decisive in the war for North America. Cook's contributions to the Quebec campaign did not go unnoticed. His superiors recognized that his exceptional surveying and cartographic skills could be put to even greater use. From 1760 to 1762, while still serving on the Northumberland, he was tasked with surveying the coasts of Newfoundland, a vital base for the British cod fishery and a strategically important location. When the 7 Years' War ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, Cook's surveying work continued. The Admiralty, impressed by the quality and accuracy of his charts, appointed him as Marine Surveyor of Newfoundland and Labrador. For the next 5 years, Cook spent his summers meticulously mapping the intricate coastline, returning to England in the winters to compile and refine his charts. The Newfoundland survey represented a significant professional achievement for Cook. He was given his own small vessel, the schooner Grenville, and considerable autonomy in carrying out his mission. The survey required not just cartographic skill, but also astronomical knowledge to determine accurate positions. Cook immersed himself in the latest scientific methods, teaching himself to use precise astronomical observations to establish longitude and latitude. During these years, Cook developed and refined the techniques that would later make his Pacific voyages so successful. He became expert in the use of the sextant and other navigational instruments. He mastered the complex mathematics of celestial navigation and learned to make accurate observations of solar eclipses and other astronomical phenomena. His charts of Newfoundland were so precise that some remained in use well into the 20th century, an extraordinary testament to their quality. In 1766, Cook made a significant astronomical observation. When he recorded a solar eclipse from a location in Newfoundland, he submitted his findings to the Royal Society in London, bringing him to the attention of Britain's premier scientific organisation. This connection would later prove crucial in his selection to lead the Pacific voyages that would make him famous. During this period, Cook also established his personal life on firmer ground. In 1762, at the age of 34, he married Elizabeth Batts, the daughter of a tavern keeper in the East End of London. The marriage took place at St. Margaret's Church in Barking, East London. Elizabeth, or Betty, as she was known to her family, was 21 years old when they wed. The couple would eventually have 6 children. though Cook's long absences at sea meant that family life was often interrupted. Their first home was in Shadwell, a maritime neighbourhood in East London, where many naval families resided. Later, as Cook's reputation and income grew, they moved to a more comfortable house in Mile End. Elizabeth proved to be a resilient and capable partner, managing the household and raising their children during Cook's long voyages. She would eventually outlive her husband by more than half a century, never remarrying and keeping his memory alive until her own death in 1835 at the age of 93. By 1768, James Cook had transformed himself from an ordinary seaman to a respected naval officer and one of Britain's most skilled cartographers. His charts of Newfoundland demonstrated his exceptional abilities, while his astronomical observations showed his scientific acumen. His reputation for careful, methodical work, combined with his practical experience of seamanship in challenging conditions, made him the ideal candidate when the Admiralty and the Royal Society were looking for someone to command a scientific expedition to the South Seas. Cook's rise from humble beginnings to his position of respect and responsibility was remarkable, but not accidental. Throughout his early career, he had shown an insatiable curiosity, a willingness to learn new skills, and a dedication to excellence in everything he undertook. These qualities, combined with his natural abilities in mathematics and navigation, had prepared him for the great voyages of exploration that would make his name immortal. As 1768 dawned, the quiet, methodical surveyor of Newfoundland stood on the threshold of the adventures that would transform him into Captain James Cook, one of history's greatest explorers. The vast, largely unknown expanse of the Pacific Ocean beckoned, with its uncharted islands, undiscovered peoples, and scientific mysteries waiting to be solved. Cook's years of preparation were about to bear fruit in ways that he could scarcely have imagined when he first gazed out at the North Sea from the shores of Staithes as a young shop apprentice. In 1768, an opportunity arose that would forever change James Cook's life and secure his place in history. The Royal Society, Britain's premier scientific organisation, was planning an expedition to the South Pacific to observe a rare astronomical event, the transit of Venus across the face of the Sun. This observation, to be made from Tahiti on June 3, 1769, was of great scientific importance. By timing the transit from different points around the globe, astronomers hoped to calculate the distance from the Earth to the Sun more accurately than ever before. The Admiralty, working in cooperation with the Royal Society, needed a skilled commander for this important scientific mission. Cook's reputation for precise navigation, astronomical observation, and cartographic excellence made him an ideal candidate, despite his relatively junior rank in the Navy's hierarchy. With the support of his patron, Sir Hugh Palliser, and the recognition of his abilities by the Admiralty, Cook was appointed to command the expedition and promoted to the rank of lieutenant. For this momentous voyage, the Admiralty purchased a sturdy former coal ship called the Earl of Pembroke, a vessel of the same type Cook had sailed during his days in the merchant service, renamed HMS Endeavour. The ship was specifically chosen for its durability, shallow draft, and ample capacity for supplies and equipment. At 106 feet in length, with a broad beam of almost 30 feet, the Endeavour was not fast, but she was stable, seaworthy, and capable of carrying the substantial provisions needed for a long voyage. The Endeavour underwent extensive modifications to prepare her for the Pacific voyage. Her hull was sheathed in wood and copper to protect against marine parasites. Additional storage spaces were constructed, and special quarters were built to accommodate the scientific gentlemen who would accompany the expedition. The ship was equipped with the latest navigational instruments, including chronometers, sextants, telescopes, and astronomical tables. What made this voyage unique was its dual purpose. While the Royal Society was primarily interested in the scientific observation of the Venus transit, the Admiralty had additional secret objectives. Cook carried sealed orders that he was instructed not to open until after the astronomical observations were complete. These secret instructions directed him to search for the hypothesized Terra Australis Incognita, the great southern continent that many geographers believed must exist to balance the land masses of the northern hemisphere. The expedition's scientific component was led by Joseph Banks, a wealthy 25-year-old naturalist with a passion for botany. Banks, who contributed a substantial sum of his own money to the venture, assembled a team of scientists and artists to document the natural history of the lands they would visit. This group included the Swedish naturalist Daniel Solander, a student of the famous botanist Linnaeus, the astronomer Charles Green, and the artists Sidney Parkinson and Alexander Buchan. Banks also brought along 2 personal servants and his secretary. On August 26, 1768, the Endeavour sailed from Plymouth, beginning what would become a landmark voyage in the history of exploration and science. Cook, now 39 years old, commanded a crew of 94 men, including the scientific contingent. The ship carried provisions for 18 months, including 10,000 pounds of ship's biscuit, 6,000 pieces of salted pork and beef, 4 tons of sauerkraut, and 3,000 gallons of beer and wine. The Endeavour's first destination was the island of Madeira, where they replenished their fresh water and took on additional supplies. From there, they sailed south across the Atlantic to Rio de Janeiro, arriving in November 1768. The Portuguese authorities, suspicious of the expedition's scientific purposes, restricted the crew's movements and limited their ability to collect specimens. Nevertheless, Banks and his team managed to gather a number of plant samples from the rich tropical environment. After leaving Rio, the Endeavour rounded Cape Horn, the treacherous southern tip of South America. Unlike many ships that attempted this passage, Cook's vessel successfully navigated the stormy seas and contrary winds without serious incident, a testament to both his seamanship and the sturdiness of the Endeavour. By April 1769, they had crossed the Pacific and reached Tahiti, with ample time to prepare for the transit of Venus. The expedition established an observation post, which they named Fort Venus, on the island's shore. Here, they constructed temporary buildings and set up their astronomical instruments. Cook established good relations with the Tahitians, particularly with a chief named Tupaya, who would later join the expedition as a navigator and interpreter. On June 3rd, 1769, the skies were clear, and the scientific teams successfully observed the transit of Venus. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of their instruments and an optical phenomenon known as the black drop effect, their timing measurements were not as precise as hoped. The primary scientific objective of the mission had been achieved, but with less accuracy than desired. With the astronomical observations complete, Cook opened his sealed orders. The Admiralty instructed him to sail south to latitude 40 degrees south, then west in search of the hypothesized southern continent. If he found no such landmass, he was to proceed to New Zealand, chart its coastline, which had been only partially explored by the Dutch navigator Abel Tasman in 1642, and then return to England by whatever route he deemed most advantageous. Following these instructions, Cook sailed the Endeavour south into the higher latitudes of the Pacific. After finding no sign of a southern continent, he turned west toward New Zealand, sighting its mountainous eastern coastline on October 6, 1769. Cook spent the next 6 months conducting the first complete circumnavigation of New Zealand's 2 main islands, producing remarkably accurate charts that would remain in use for generations. The New Zealand portion of the voyage was not without challenges. The local Maori people, warrior societies with no previous experience of European visitors, since Tasman's brief visit over a century earlier sometimes responded to the strangers with hostility. There were several violent encounters, resulting in casualties among the Maori. Cook, while not averse to using force when he felt threatened, generally preferred to establish peaceful relations with indigenous peoples. He took care to learn about their customs and to trade fairly for supplies. On April 1, 1770, having completed his survey of New Zealand, Cook decided to sail west rather than returning directly to England. This fateful decision led to one of the most significant discoveries of his career. On April 19, 1770, the expedition sighted the southeastern coast of Australia, a land only partially known to Europeans through earlier Dutch explorations of its western shores. Cook named the land he saw New South Wales, claiming it for Britain, and proceeded to sail northward along the eastern coastline, carefully charting as he went. The expedition made its first Australian landfall at a place Cook named Botany Bay, due to the extraordinary variety of plant specimens collected there by Banks and Solander. The Aboriginal inhabitants they encountered showed little interest in the strangers, neither welcoming nor openly hostile. Continuing north along the Australian coast, the Endeavour encountered a serious crisis on June 11, 1770. While sailing at night near what is now called the Great Barrier Reef, the ship struck coral and began taking on water. Quick action by the crew, who fothered the ship, patching the hole from the outside with a sail drawn under the hull, prevented immediate disaster. Cook managed to navigate the damaged vessel to a river mouth, where the ship was beached for repairs. This location, where they spent 7 weeks, became known as Cooktown. During the repairs, the scientific team explored the surrounding area, documenting new species and interacting with Aboriginal peoples. One significant discovery was the kangaroo, which Banks described and Parkinson illustrated, the first such record of this marsupial by Europeans. With the Endeavour repaired, Cook continued his northward journey, navigating the treacherous waters between Australia and New Guinea. This passage, now known as the Torres Strait, after the Spanish navigator Luis Vaz de Torres, who had traversed it in 1606, was one of the most dangerous segments of the voyage. Cook's careful navigation and the detailed charts he created opened a new route for European shipping in the region. The expedition then crossed the Indian Ocean to Batavia, now Jakarta, the capital of the Dutch East Indies, arriving in October 1770. Here, the crew could rest and the ship could undergo more thorough repairs before the long journey home. Tragically, Batavia proved far more deadly than any of the remote islands or uncharted waters they had visited. The city was notorious for its unhealthy climate and tropical diseases. Many of the crew, including the astronomer Charles Green and the artist Sidney Parkinson, fell ill with malaria and dysentery. By the time they departed in December, 7 had died, and many more were sick. The voyage home took the Endeavour around the Cape of Good Hope and north through the Atlantic. The toll of disease continued, with more deaths among the crew. Despite these hardships, Cook maintained discipline and kept the ship on course. Finally, on July 13, 1771, nearly 3 years after their departure, the Endeavour sailed into the English port of Dover. The impact of Cook's first voyage was immense. He had circumnavigated the globe, accurately charted New Zealand and Australia's eastern coastline, observed the transit of Venus, and brought back thousands of plant and animal specimens previously unknown to European science. His detailed journals and maps provided invaluable information about the Pacific region, its geography, and its peoples. Beyond these tangible achievements, the voyage represented a new approach to exploration, one that combined military objectives with scientific inquiry. The collaboration between Cook, the practical navigator, and Banks, the scientific gentleman, exemplified the Enlightenment ideal of rational investigation of the natural world. Their careful observations, systematic documentation, and respect for empirical evidence set a standard for future exploratory expeditions. For James Cook personally, the success of the Endeavour voyage transformed him from a skilled but relatively obscure naval officer into a figure of national importance. His achievements were recognized at the highest levels. He was received by King George III and promoted to the rank of commander. The Royal Society, impressed by his contributions to scientific knowledge, published his observations and later elected him a fellow. Yet despite this recognition, Cook remained the same methodical, unassuming man he had always been. While Joseph Banks became a celebrity in London society, Cook preferred to focus on the practical lessons of the voyage and the preparations for future explorations. His thoughts were already turning to questions left unanswered, particularly the existence or non-existence of the great southern continent that had eluded him on this first venture into the Pacific. The Endeavour voyage had confirmed James Cook's exceptional abilities as an explorer, navigator, and leader of men. His combination of practical seamanship, scientific curiosity, and steady temperament had proven ideal for the challenges of Pacific exploration. The Admiralty, recognizing these qualities, would soon call upon him for an even more ambitious journey, one that would take him farther south than any European had ventured before, in a definitive search for the elusive Terra Australis. Following the success of his first Pacific voyage, Cook might have been content to rest on his laurels, enjoying his newfound fame and the more comfortable life it afforded. He had spent nearly 3 years at sea, endured countless hardships, and accomplished far more than his original mission had required. Yet the call of exploration proved irresistible. There were still great geographical questions to be answered, and Cook was uniquely qualified to pursue them. The most pressing of these questions concerned the existence of Terra Australis Incognita, the hypothetical great southern continent. Philosophers and geographers had speculated about this landmass for centuries, believing it necessary to balance the Earth's northern continents. Cook's first voyage had disproven its existence in the South Pacific regions he had traversed, but vast areas remained unexplored, particularly in the higher southern latitudes. In 1772, the British Admiralty decided to mount a second expedition specifically to resolve the Terra Australis question once and for all. Cook, now promoted to the rank of commander, was the natural choice to lead this ambitious venture. The voyage would take him into the forbidding waters of the far southern ocean, where no European ships had previously sailed. For this new mission, Cook was given 2 vessels. He would again command the Resolution, a converted Whitby collier similar to but larger than the Endeavour, while Captain Tobias Furneaux would command the accompanying vessel, Adventure. Both ships were sturdy, well-built vessels suited to the rigors of a long voyage in challenging conditions. The Resolution, at 111 feet long, was slightly larger than the Endeavour and carried a crew of 112 men, including the scientific contingent. The scientific component of this second expedition differed somewhat from the first. Joseph Banks had initially planned to join again and had spent lavishly to prepare accommodations and equipment. However, his demands for modifications to the Resolution proved excessive, threatening the ship's stability. When the Admiralty refused to make all his requested changes, Banks withdrew, taking most of his scientific team with him. In their place, the Admiralty appointed Johann Reinhold Forster, a German naturalist, and his son Georg as the expedition's scientists. They were joined by William Hodges, a talented landscape artist who would document the lands they visited, and William Wales, an astronomer tasked with testing new methods for determining longitude at sea. Among the crew were several men who would later achieve fame in their own right, including a young midshipman, named George Vancouver, who would become an important explorer of the Pacific Northwest coast. Cook's instructions for this voyage were clear: to circumnavigate the globe in high southern latitudes, searching for Terra Australis. He was to explore as far south as possible, limited only by the presence of ice or the discovery of land. The expedition was also to test the latest navigational technology, particularly John Harrison's H4 marine chronometer and a copy made by Larkham Kendall, which promised to solve the long-standing problem of accurately determining longitude at sea. On July 13, 1772, the Resolution and Adventure departed from Plymouth. The ships sailed first to Madeira and then to the Cape of Good Hope, where they took on additional supplies and prepared for the Southern Ocean crossing. Cook had decided to approach the high southern latitudes from the east, taking advantage of the prevailing westerly winds. In late November 1772, the expedition left the Cape and headed south into increasingly cold and stormy seas. On December 14th, they encountered their first icebergs, massive floating mountains of ice that posed significant dangers to navigation. Despite these hazards, Cook pressed on southward, determined to explore as far as possible. On January 17, 1773, Cook achieved a historic milestone by becoming the first known navigator to cross the Antarctic Circle, reaching latitude 67° south. The ships were surrounded by ice fields and icebergs, navigating through fog and harsh conditions that tested the crew's endurance. Finding further progress blocked by pack ice, Cook turned northward to continue his circumnavigation in slightly lower latitudes. The expedition sailed to New Zealand, arriving at Dusky Bay, now Dusky Sound, in March 1773. Here, they established a temporary base, allowing the crew to rest and the scientists to explore the rich natural environment. Cook spent several weeks carefully charting this complex fjord system on the southwest coast of New Zealand's South Island, producing maps of exceptional quality. From Dusky Bay, the ships proceeded to Queen Charlotte Sound, where they had stopped during the first voyage. It was here that a significant setback occurred. During a storm in October 1773, the Resolution and Adventure became separated. Despite Cook's careful arrangements for a rendezvous, the ships failed to reunite. Captain Furneaux, after waiting for the Resolution at the agreed meeting point, eventually decided to return to England alone, taking a direct route via Cape Horn. Cook, meanwhile, continued with his mission undeterred. After waiting for the Adventure and resupplying the Resolution, he sailed south again into the frigid waters beyond 60° south latitude. On December 22, 1773, the Resolution once more crossed the Antarctic Circle. This time, Cook pressed even further south, reaching latitude 71° south on January 30, 1774. A record that would stand for decades as the furthest south any human had travelled. The Resolution encountered a solid barrier of ice that prevented any further progress toward the pole. Cook described it as a solid ice field of immense extent, whose southern boundaries we could not see. He had sailed far enough south to prove conclusively that if a southern continent existed, it lay within the Antarctic Circle and was covered in ice, not the temperate, habitable land of the Terra Australis theories. Having resolved the primary geographical question of his voyage, Cook turned northward. Rather than taking the shortest route home, he embarked on an extensive exploration of the central and eastern Pacific. The Resolution visited Tahiti again, where the crew rested and replenished supplies. Cook renewed his acquaintance with the Tahitian chiefs and gathered more information about the island's society and customs. From Tahiti, Cook sailed west to continue his explorations. He visited the Friendly Islands, now Tonga, where he was warmly received by the local people. The expedition spent several weeks there, with Cook carefully documenting the islands, their resources, and the customs of their inhabitants. The name Friendly Islands was bestowed because of the seemingly hospitable nature of the Tongan people, though Cook later learned they had actually been planning to attack his ship, but couldn't agree on how to do it. One of Cook's most significant discoveries during this part of the voyage was the island group he named the New Hebrides, now Vanuatu. Although European navigators had sighted some of these islands before, Cook conducted the first systematic exploration and mapping of the archipelago. He also discovered and named New Caledonia, a large island with a striking mountain range running its length. Throughout these explorations, Cook maintained his commitment to accurate charting and scientific observation. The expedition collected countless specimens of plants and animals, made astronomical observations to fix positions precisely, and created detailed records of the peoples they encountered. William Hodges produced magnificent paintings of the landscapes, while the Forsters compiled extensive notes on natural history and ethnography. After exploring the Central Pacific, Cook decided to make one more sweep of the higher southern latitudes to ensure no significant land had been missed. He sailed southeast from New Zealand, discovering and naming the uninhabited South Sandwich Islands and South Georgia Island. These bleak, ice-covered lands were hardly the rich southern continent of speculation, but they represented important discoveries nonetheless. With winter approaching in the southern hemisphere, Cook finally turned the Resolution toward home in early 1775. The ship rounded Cape Horn and crossed the South Atlantic, stopping briefly at the Cape of Good Hope before the final leg to England. On July 30, 1775, the Resolution arrived at Spithead, completing a voyage of more than 3 years and covering approximately 70,000 miles. The achievements of Cook's second voyage were remarkable. He'd circumnavigated the globe in high southern latitudes, crossed the Antarctic Circle multiple times, reached farther south than any previous navigator, and conclusively disproven the existence of a temperate southern continent. He had discovered new islands, created accurate charts of vast regions, and accumulated a wealth of scientific knowledge about the Pacific world. Just as importantly, Cook had accomplished these feats while maintaining the health of his crew to an unprecedented degree. Not a single man died of scurvy during the entire voyage, an extraordinary achievement at a time when the disease routinely decimated ships' companies on long voyages. Cook's insistence on proper diet, including sauerkraut, fresh fruit whenever possible, and a concentrated form of wort of malt, cleanliness, and adequate ventilation established new standards for maritime health that would influence naval practice for generations. The success of the chronometers was another significant outcome of the voyage. Kendall's K1, a copy of Harrison's H4, performed admirably throughout the journey, enabling Cook to determine longitude with unprecedented accuracy. This technological advancement revolutionized navigation, making possible the precise charting that was one of Cook's greatest contributions to geography. Upon his return, Cook was promoted to the rank of post captain and elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, which awarded him its prestigious Copley Medal for his paper on preventing scurvy at sea. He was received by King George III and became something of a celebrity, though he remained characteristically modest about his accomplishments. The artist Nathaniel Dance Holland painted his portrait, which depicts Cook as a confident but unassuming figure, holding his own charts of the Pacific. Cook might well have retired at this point. He was offered an honourable position at Greenwich Hospital, which would have provided a comfortable sinecure for the rest of his life. He had spent much of the previous decade at sea, away from his wife Elizabeth and their children, several of whom had died during his long absences. Yet when the Admiralty approached him about a third voyage to the Pacific, Cook found the lure of exploration impossible to resist. There was one great geographical question that remained unanswered. the existence of a Northwest Passage connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and James Cook was determined to be the one to solve it. The Second Pacific Voyage had firmly established Cook as the preeminent explorer of his age. His methods, combining practical seamanship with scientific rigor, had set new standards for exploration. His charts had opened the Pacific to European understanding in unprecedented ways. Now, as he contemplated a third great journey, he stood at the height of his powers and reputation, ready to venture into the northern reaches of the Pacific in search of the elusive Northwest Passage that had tantalized explorers for centuries. In 1776, as the American colonies were declaring their independence from Great Britain, Captain James Cook was preparing for what would become his third and final voyage of exploration. The British Admiralty, having seen his remarkable successes in the southern Pacific, now turned their attention to another great geographical question: the existence of a Northwest Passage, a sea route through the Arctic connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The search for this passage had occupied European explorers for centuries. Finding a navigable route across the top of North America would open a valuable trade route to Asia, avoiding the long journey around Cape Horn or the Cape of Good Hope. Previous attempts to discover the passage had approached from the Atlantic side, but all had been blocked by ice. The Admiralty now proposed to search from the Pacific, hoping that an eastern approach might prove more successful. Cook, at 47 years old, was the natural choice to lead this expedition. His experience, navigational skill, and proven leadership made him uniquely qualified for the challenging mission ahead. Though he had accepted a comfortable retirement position at Greenwich Hospital, he obtained permission to relinquish this post when offered command of the new Voyage. For this expedition, Cook would again command the Resolution, the sturdy vessel that had served him so well on his second voyage. The companion ship would be the Discovery, commanded initially by Captain Charles Clark, who had sailed with Cook on both previous voyages. Among the officers were John Gore, James King, and a young midshipman named George Vancouver, who would later become a noted explorer in his own right. The ships carried crews totaling about 193 men. The scientific contingent included William Anderson as surgeon and naturalist, William Bailey as astronomer, and John Webber as official artist. Webber's role would prove particularly important, as his paintings and drawings would create the visual record of the lands and peoples encountered during the voyage, including the first European depictions of Hawaii. The expedition's public objective was to return Omai, a young man from Raiatea, near Tahiti, who had been brought to England by Captain Furneaux. During the second voyage, Omai had become something of a sensation in London society, even being presented at court to King George III. However, this was largely a cover story. The true mission, detailed in Cook's sealed orders, was to search for a Northwest Passage by approaching from the Pacific side, exploring the coastlines of northwestern America and northeastern Asia. On July 12, 1776, the Resolution and Discovery departed from Plymouth. The ships followed a now familiar route, sailing first to the Cape of Good Hope, where they arrived in October. After resupplying, they continued eastward, making a brief stop at the remote Kerguelen Island in the southern Indian Ocean. Here, Cook found a note left in a bottle by the French explorer Yves-Joseph de Kerguelen-Tremarec, who had visited the island in 1773. Cook added his own message to the bottle, raised the British flag, and named the place Desolation Island, reflecting its bleak, barren landscape. The expedition continued to Tasmania and then to New Zealand, arriving at Queen Charlotte Sound in February 1777. After repairs and rest, they sailed north into the Central Pacific, visiting familiar islands and discovering new ones. In August 1777, they reached Tahiti, where Omai was returned to his homeland with many gifts and souvenirs from his time in England. From Tahiti, Cook sailed north, and on January 18, 1778, made one of his most significant discoveries, the Hawaiian Islands, which he named the Sandwich Islands in honor of his patron, the Earl of Sandwich, First Lord of the Admiralty. The Hawaiians received the Europeans with great hospitality, providing fresh food and water. Cook and his crew spent several weeks exploring the islands of Kauai and Niihau before continuing their journey toward the northwest coast of America. On March 7, 1778, Cook sighted the Oregon coast, making landfall near the Suislaw River. From there, the expedition sailed northward along the coastline of what is now Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. They carefully charted the coast, looking for possible inlets that might lead to a passage across the continent. In late March, they discovered and named Cape Flattery at the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, but did not explore the strait itself, missing an opportunity to investigate what would later prove to be an important waterway. Continuing north, they found a large inlet that they initially thought might be the entrance to the Northwest Passage. This was Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island, where they stopped for a month to repair the ships and interact with the local Nucha North people. From Nootka Sound, the expedition continued northward along the Alaskan coast, passing through the Aleutian Islands and into the Bering Sea. In August 1778, they sailed through the Bering Strait, becoming one of the first European vessels to do so since Vitus Bering in 1728. Cook named the westernmost point of North America Cape Prince of Wales and the easternmost point of Asia, East Cape. Pushing northward into the Arctic Ocean, the ships encountered increasing amounts of pack ice. By August 18th, they had reached latitude 70°44' north, where their progress was blocked by an impenetrable wall of ice. Cook attempted to find a way through by sailing eastward along the edge of the ice pack, but all routes north were closed. After careful exploration of the Arctic coast of both America and Asia, he was forced to conclude that no practicable Northwest Passage existed, at least not one navigable by the sailing ships of his era. With the Arctic winter approaching and further exploration impossible, Cook decided to sail south to the Hawaiian Islands to wait out the winter months before making another attempt the following summer. The expedition arrived at Maui in late November 1778, becoming the first Europeans to visit that island. After charting its coastline, they continued to the Big Island of Hawaii, anchoring in Kealakekua Bay in January 1779. The timing of their arrival coincided with a Hawaiian festival honoring the god Lono. Some scholars believe that the Hawaiians may have associated Cook with Lono, particularly as his ship, with its masts and sails, resembled certain symbols associated with the god. Whatever the reason, Cook and his men received an extraordinary welcome, with elaborate ceremonies and generous provisions of food and fresh water. For about a month, relations between the Europeans and Hawaiians remained cordial. The crew replenished their supplies, and the scientists and artists documented Hawaiian culture, creating invaluable records of a society that would soon experience dramatic changes due to European contact. John Weber's paintings of Hawaiian scenes, clothing, and artifacts provide some of the earliest and most detailed visual documentation of traditional Hawaiian life. On February 4, 1779, the Resolution and Discovery departed Kealakekua Bay, intending to continue their exploration of the Hawaiian archipelago before returning to the Arctic when weather permitted. However, shortly after leaving, the Resolution suffered damage to its foremast during a storm. Cook decided to return to Kealakekua Bay for repairs, arriving on February 11th. This time, the reception was noticeably cooler. The festival of Lono had ended, and the bay may have been considered kapu, taboo, for visitors at that time of year. tensions began to build between the Hawaiians and the Europeans. Disputes arose over trade, and several small thefts occurred, including the taking of a ship's cutter, small boat, from the Discovery. Cook, following a practice he had employed in similar situations, decided to take a high-ranking Hawaiian chief hostage until the stolen boat was returned. On the morning of February 14, 1779, he went ashore with a small party of Marines. A large crowd gathered as Cook attempted to persuade King Kalaniʻopuʻu to come aboard the Resolution. As they walked toward the shore, news arrived that a Hawaiian chief had been killed by the crew of one of Cook's boats on the other side of the bay. The situation quickly deteriorated. The crowd grew hostile, and Cook's party was surrounded. As Cook and his men retreated toward their boats, stones were thrown and threatening gestures made. Cook fired one of his pistols, loaded with small shot, which failed to penetrate a warrior's protective mat. The Marines discharged their muskets, but were quickly overwhelmed. In the ensuing melee, Cook was struck on the head and then stabbed multiple times. He fell face forward into the shallow water at the shore's edge. The death of Captain James Cook sent shockwaves through the expedition. The remaining boats hastily retreated to the ships, leaving Cook's body on the shore. Lieutenant James King, who would later complete Cook's journal, recorded that the crew was all in the utmost horror and consternation. Captain Charles Clark, who had been ill with tuberculosis, assumed command of the expedition. For several days, tense relations continued between the Hawaiians and the British, with sporadic violence on both sides. Through negotiations with Hawaiian priests, some of Cook's remains were eventually recovered and given a burial at sea on February 22, 1779. The ships departed Kealakekua Bay the next day, a place forever marked by the tragic end of the great explorer's life. Under Clark's command, the expedition continued with its mission, returning to the Arctic in the summer of 1779 to make another attempt at finding the Northwest Passage. Once again, they were blocked by ice, confirming Cook's conclusion that no practical passage existed. Clark, whose health had been deteriorating throughout the voyage, died of tuberculosis on August 22, 1779, while the ships were near Kamchatka in Russia. Command then passed to John Gore, with James King taking charge of the Discovery. The expedition finally returned to England in October 1780, more than 4 years after its departure. Despite the tragic loss of Cook and the failure to find a Northwest Passage, the voyage had achieved significant geographical discoveries, including the Hawaiian Islands and detailed charts of the North Pacific coastlines. The scientific and ethnographic records, particularly Weber's artwork, provided invaluable documentation of the peoples and lands they had visited. The impact of Cook's death reverberated throughout Europe. He had become one of the most famous and respected men of his time, celebrated for his achievements in exploration, navigation, and science. News of his violent end in Hawaii shocked the public and led to an outpouring of tributes. Artists created paintings and engravings depicting his death, often in romanticized or historically inaccurate ways that emphasized his heroism. Writers composed elegies and biographies, cementing his place in the pantheon of great explorers. The story of Cook's final moments has been subject to various interpretations over the years. Some early accounts portrayed the Hawaiians as savage killers, while others suggested that Cook had made tactical errors in his handling of the situation. Modern scholars have examined both the European and Hawaiian perspectives, recognizing the complex cultural misunderstandings that contributed to the tragedy. What remains clear is that Cook's death marked the end of an extraordinary career that had changed humanity's understanding of the world. The 3 Pacific voyages led by James Cook had transformed the map of the globe. He had sailed farther south than any European before him, circumnavigated New Zealand, charted Australia's eastern coastline, crossed the Antarctic Circle, explored the North Pacific, and discovered numerous islands. His careful observations and accurate charts replaced speculation with knowledge, dispelling myths and providing reliable information that would guide mariners for generations. Beyond geographical discovery, Cook's voyages had advanced scientific knowledge across multiple fields. The naturalists who accompanied him collected thousands of plant and animal specimens previously unknown to European science. His astronomical observations contributed to a better understanding of celestial phenomena. His ethnographic records documented Pacific cultures before they were irrevocably changed by increasing European contact. In the realm of maritime practice, Cook's innovations in preserving the health of his crews set new standards. His methods for preventing scurvy, maintaining cleanliness aboard ship, ensuring adequate ventilation, and providing foods rich in vitamin C, saved countless lives and influenced naval practices for decades to come. His testing of the marine chronometer helped establish its value for determining longitude, revolutionizing navigation. Cook's legacy lives on in the hundreds of place names that bear his name, from Cook Strait between New Zealand's two main islands to Cook Inlet in Alaska, from the Cook Islands in the South Pacific to countless Cook Bays, Cook Points, and Cook Mountains scattered across the world. More significantly, his influence persists in the scientific approach to exploration that he pioneered, combining practical seamanship with rigorous observation and documentation. The third voyage, despite its tragic conclusion, completed Cook's extraordinary contribution to human knowledge, from his humble beginnings in Yorkshire to his final moments on a Hawaiian beach. James Cook had led a life defined by curiosity, courage, and an unquenchable desire to venture beyond the horizon. In his relatively brief career as an explorer, just over a decade, he had accomplished more than many could achieve in several lifetimes, forever changing how we see our world and establishing a legacy that continues to inspire explorers, scientists, and navigators to this day. James Cook's voyages of discovery were remarkable, not only for the geographical knowledge they produced, but also for the revolutionary methods and innovations he introduced to maritime exploration. These advances in navigation, cartography, crew health, and scientific documentation set new standards that would influence explorers for generations to come. Behind Cook's impressive achievements lay a methodical mind and a practical approach to problem solving that transformed the very nature of maritime exploration. Perhaps Cook's most significant contribution to navigation was his meticulous approach to charting and map-making. Unlike many earlier explorers who produced rough sketches or generalized maps, Cook insisted on precise, detailed charts based on careful measurements. His experience as a surveyor in Newfoundland had taught him the importance of accuracy, and he applied these principles throughout his Pacific voyages. Cook's charting process was systematic and thorough. He would begin by establishing accurate baseline measurements, often using astronomical observations to determine latitude and longitude precisely. His ships would then methodically survey coastlines, with crewmen taking soundings to measure water depths and noting prominent landmarks. Cook personally oversaw much of this work, sometimes spending hours in a small boat close to shore to ensure accuracy. The charts produced through this process were works of remarkable precision. Cook's map of New Zealand, created during his first voyage, was so accurate that it remained the standard reference for nearly a century. His chart of the St. Lawrence River, made during his earlier naval service, was still in use during World War II, almost 2 centuries later. This level of cartographic accuracy was unprecedented and transformed navigation from an art relying heavily on experience and intuition into a more scientific practice based on reliable data. Cook was among the first explorers to fully embrace the latest technological innovations in navigation. During his voyages, he tested and refined the use of the lunar distance method for determining longitude, a complex mathematical technique that required precise astronomical observations. He also carried and tested the latest marine chronometers, including Larkham Kendall's K1, a copy of John Harrison's revolutionary H4 timepiece. These chronometers represented a breakthrough in solving the longitude problem, the difficulty of determining a ship's east-west position at sea. Cook's careful documentation of their performance, particularly the excellent results obtained with Kendall's K1 during the second voyage, helped establish the reliability of chronometers for maritime navigation. In his journal, Cook praised the timepiece as our faithful guide through all the vicissitudes of climates. Cook's approach to astronomical observation was similarly methodical. He worked closely with the professional astronomers who accompanied his voyages, including Charles Green on the first voyage and William Wales on the second. Together, they made numerous observations of solar eclipses, lunar positions, and the transits of Venus and Mercury. These observations not only helped establish accurate positions, but also contributed to astronomical science more broadly. One of Cook's most humanitarian innovations was his approach to maintaining crew health, particularly his success in preventing scurvy, the vitamin C deficiency disease that had killed countless sailors on long voyages. While the exact cause of scurvy wasn't understood in Cook's time, he implemented a comprehensive strategy that proved remarkably effective. Cook insisted on a diet that included foods we now know to be rich in vitamin C. He carried large quantities of sauerkraut, which retained some vitamin C during storage. He encouraged the collection of fresh fruits and vegetables whenever possible during shore visits. He experimented with water malt, the liquid extracted from malted barley, citrus extracts, and spruce beer as potential anti-scorbutics. The results were extraordinary. On his second voyage, not a single man died of scurvy during more than 3 years at sea. Beyond diet, Cook established rigorous hygiene practices aboard his ships. He insisted on regular cleaning of the crew's quarters, frequent washing of bedding, and good ventilation throughout the vessel. He required his men to bathe regularly, an unusual practice for sailors of that era, and to keep their clothing clean. These measures helped prevent not only scurvy, but also many other diseases that commonly afflicted ship's crews on long voyages. Cook's attention to his men's welfare extended to many other aspects of shipboard life. He regulated their work routines to prevent excessive fatigue, ensured they had adequate rest, and provided entertainment when possible. He made special provision for men who showed early symptoms of illness, adjusting their duties and diet to promote recovery. This holistic approach to crew health was revolutionary and contributed significantly to the success of his voyages. The Royal Society formally recognized Cook's achievements in this area, awarding him the prestigious Copley Medal in 1776 for his paper on the health of seamen, which detailed his methods for preventing scurvy and maintaining crew health. Sir John Pringle, in presenting the medal, declared that Cook had not only made the most extensive but the most enlightened discoveries, showing what study and what pains he had taken to fulfill the purpose of beneficence. Cook's leadership style represented another important innovation in exploration. Unlike many naval commanders of his era, who relied heavily on strict discipline and punishment, Cook generally led by example and sought to build positive relationships with his crews. While he could be stern when necessary, he preferred to earn respect through competence, fairness, and concern for his men's welfare. This approach created a shipboard environment conducive to exploration and discovery. Cook encouraged curiosity among his officers and men, often involving them in scientific observations and specimen collection. He recognized and rewarded initiative, promoting talented individuals regardless of their background or formal education. His own story, rising from humble origins to command through merit rather than privilege, embodied this meritocratic approach. Cook's interactions with indigenous peoples represented another significant departure from the practices of many earlier explorers. While his approach was not perfect by modern standards and reflected the attitudes of his time, he generally sought to establish peaceful relations with the peoples he encountered. In his journal, he wrote, "We are in no condition to enforce traffic amongst any of these people, and a little friendly commerce with them could never be considered as improper." Cook established several principles for these interactions. He insisted on fair trading, forbidding his men from taking items without appropriate exchange. He attempted to learn about local customs and respect them when possible. He tried to prevent the spread of European diseases among indigenous communities, though with limited success given the medical knowledge of the time. When conflicts did occur, he generally preferred demonstration over deadly force, though he did resort to violence when he felt threatened. The scientific dimension of Cook's voyages represented another revolutionary contribution to exploration. Previous expeditions had sometimes included collectors or observers, but Cook integrated scientific inquiry into the very fabric of his missions. His ships carried professional naturalists, astronomers, and artists specifically tasked with documenting the lands, peoples, flora, and fauna encountered during the voyages. This scientific contingent was equipped with the latest instruments and methods. They collected and preserved thousands of plant and animal specimens, many previously unknown to European science. They documented astronomical phenomena with precision. The artists created detailed visual records of landscapes, peoples, and species. All of this material was carefully preserved and returned to England, where it contributed significantly to scientific knowledge. Cook himself participated actively in this scientific work. He made astronomical observations, collected specimens, and documented his observations in meticulous detail in his journals. He understood that exploration was not merely about claiming territories or finding routes, but about expanding human knowledge more broadly. This integration of scientific inquiry with geographical exploration established a model that would influence expeditions for centuries to come. In his careful documentation, Cook set another important standard for explorers. His journals provide extraordinarily detailed records of his voyages, including navigational data, observations of weather and ocean conditions, descriptions of lands and peoples, and reflections on the challenges and achievements of the expeditions. These journals, published after his return, became valuable resources not only for future navigators, but also for scientists, ethnographers, and historians. Cook's documentation was characterized by careful observation, precise description, and a remarkable degree of objectivity for his time. He attempted to record what he saw accurately, even when it contradicted European expectations or prejudices. His descriptions of Pacific Island cultures, while not free from the biases of his era, show a genuine attempt to understand different ways of life on their own terms, rather than merely judging them against European standards. The technical innovations Cook employed extended to his ships themselves. He selected vessels suited to the particular challenges of Pacific exploration. Sturdy, relatively shallow-drafted ships that could navigate coastal waters, carry substantial provisions, and withstand the stresses of long voyages in varied conditions. He supervised their fitting out personally, ensuring they were properly equipped and prepared for the journeys ahead. Cook paid special attention to provisioning, recognizing that adequate supplies were essential for successful long-distance voyages. His ships carried dried and preserved foods, but he also took advantage of every opportunity to acquire fresh provisions during shore visits. He established gardens on Pacific Islands, planting European vegetables that could be harvested by later voyagers. He even transported livestock, including cattle, sheep, goats, and poultry. to various islands, intending to establish sustainable food sources for future explorers and settlers. The cumulative effect of these various innovations was to transform the nature of maritime exploration. Cook's voyages demonstrated that with proper planning, careful navigation, attention to crew health, and scientific methodology, ships could undertake journeys of unprecedented duration and scope. The mortality rates on his expeditions were remarkably low compared to earlier long-distance voyages, proving that exploration need not come at a terrible human cost. Perhaps most fundamentally, Cook established a model of exploration based on observation, documentation, and the accumulation of reliable knowledge. His voyages were not primarily about conquest or exploitation, though they did serve imperial interests. Rather, they were about mapping the unknown, understanding diverse environments and cultures, and expanding the boundaries of human knowledge. This approach, combining practical seamanship with scientific inquiry, would influence explorers from Vancouver to Darwin and beyond. Cook's methods and innovations earned him recognition as one of the greatest explorers in history. His combination of navigational skill, leadership ability, scientific curiosity, and humanitarian concern created a legacy that extends far beyond the geographical features that bear his name. In his innovative approaches to cartography, crew health, scientific documentation, and cross-cultural interaction, James Cook truly changed the world of exploration forever. The morning of February 14, 1779, dawned clear over Kealakekua Bay on the western shore of Hawaii's Big Island. The tranquil waters reflected the towering cliffs that embraced the curved bay like protective arms. Nearby, the HMS Resolution and HMS Discovery lay at anchor, their masts rising above the gentle Pacific swells. Captain James Cook, now in his 51st year, prepared for what he expected to be a routine operation to recover a stolen ship's cutter. None aboard could have imagined that this day would mark the end of one of history's greatest voyages of exploration. The events leading to this fateful morning had begun several days earlier. The Resolution and Discovery had initially departed Kealakekua Bay on February 4th, after a month-long stay during which the expedition had been generously received by the Hawaiians. Cook's intention had been to continue exploring the Hawaiian archipelago before returning to the North Pacific in the spring. However, shortly after leaving, the Resolution suffered damage to its foremast during a storm, forcing Cook to return to Kealakekua for repairs. When the ships returned on February 11th, they found a markedly different reception. The Makahiki Festival, which had been underway during their first visit, and which some scholars believe led to Cook being associated with the Hawaiian god Lono, had now ended. The bay may have been considered kapu, forbidden, during this period, and the unexpected return of the foreigners created tension. Where before there had been generous provisioning and warm hospitality, now there were restrictions on trade and increasing incidents of petty theft. The situation deteriorated further on the evening of February 13th, when natives took a cutter, small boat, belonging to the Discovery. This theft of a vessel crossed a significant line for Cook, who could tolerate small pilfering, but considered ship's boats essential equipment that must be recovered. Throughout his voyages, he had established a pattern for dealing with such situations. Take a high-ranking local leader hostage until the stolen property was returned. On the morning of February 14th, Cook went ashore with a party of 9 Marines, led by Lieutenant Molesworth Phillips. His plan was to invite King Kalani'opu aboard the Resolution as a guest, effectively holding him as security until the cutter was returned. This strategy had worked successfully in similar situations during previous voyages in the Pacific. Cook and his party landed at the village of Ka'awaloa, on the northern shore of Kealakekua Bay, near a temple complex called Hikiau Heiau. As they walked toward the king's residence, word of their arrival spread, and a large crowd of Hawaiians began to gather. The atmosphere was tense but not immediately hostile. Cook found Kalaniʻōpuʻu and invited him to come aboard the Resolution. Initially, the elderly king agreed and began walking with Cook toward the shore. However, his wives and several chiefs became concerned and urged him not to go. As the party neared the beach, the crowd grew larger and more agitated. The situation was further complicated by news arriving from across the bay. A small boat from the Discovery, commanded by Lieutenant John Williamson, had fired upon a canoe whose occupants they suspected of stealing. The shots had killed a prominent chief named Kalimu. As this news spread through the crowd at Ka'awaloa, the mood darkened considerably. Sensing the deteriorating situation, Kalaniʻōpuʻu sat down and refused to go further. Cook, realizing that his plan was failing, reluctantly abandoned the attempt to take the king aboard. He and his marines began retreating toward their boats, which waited at the water's edge. By now, the crowd had swelled to perhaps 1,000 or more Hawaiians, many armed with clubs, daggers, and stones. As the marines backed toward the shore, stones began to fly. Cook ordered his men to load their muskets, but initially instructed them to fire only if attacked. When one of the marines was struck by a rock, the situation escalated. Cook himself fired one of his pistols, loaded with small shot rather than a ball, at an advancing warrior. The shot struck the man's protective mat but did not penetrate it. This ineffective response may have emboldened the Hawaiians. The Marines discharged their muskets, killing at least one Hawaiian. The crowd, rather than dispersing, became enraged and rushed forward. Cook turned his back to fire his second pistol at another advancing warrior. In that moment of vulnerability, he was struck from behind with a club or dagger. As he fell forward into the shallow water at the edge of the bay, he was surrounded by warriors who stabbed him multiple times with daggers, including iron daggers that the Hawaiians had acquired through trade with the Europeans, from the boats and ships offshore. The horrifying scene unfolded before the eyes of the stunned British sailors. Lieutenant James King later wrote in the ship's journal, "Our unfortunate commander, the last time he was seen distinctly, was standing at the water's edge and calling out to the boats to cease firing and to pull in, for it was not possible for any humanity to witness the scene that followed without being petrified with horror." 4 Marines were also killed in the melee: Corporal James Thomas and Privates Theophilus Hinks, Thomas Fatchett, and John Allen. The surviving Marines and sailors managed to reach the boats and retreated to the ships, leaving Cook's body on the shore. The death of Captain Cook plunged the expedition into crisis. Charles Clark, commander of the Discovery, assumed leadership of the expedition. The crews were devastated by the loss of their leader and angry at what they perceived as a treacherous attack. Some advocated a punitive expedition to destroy the village and avenge Cook's death, but Clark chose a more measured response. Over the next few days, tense negotiations took place between the British and the Hawaiians. Several skirmishes occurred, resulting in deaths on both sides. The ships maintained a blockade of the bay, preventing fishing canoes from leaving the shore. Through the mediation of priests associated with the Temple of Lono, some of Cook's remains were eventually recovered and returned to the Resolution on February 20th. The recovered remains included some bones, the skull, and Cook's hands, which were identifiable by a distinctive scar on the right hand from an injury he had sustained years earlier. These partial remains were placed in a casket and committed to the sea with full naval honours on February 23, 1779. Lieutenant James King recorded the solemn occasion in the ship's journal. "We committed to the deep the body of our commander, with all the respectful solemnity and honour due to a person of his distinguished character. The following day, the Resolution and Discovery raised anchor and departed Kealakekua Bay, continuing the voyage under Clark's command. The expedition would attempt once more to find the Northwest Passage, but like Cook before him, Clark found the way blocked by ice. Clark himself was gravely ill with tuberculosis and died at sea on August 22, 1779. Leadership then passed to John Gore, who guided the ships back to England, arriving in October 1780. News of Cook's death reached England before the ships returned and caused a sensation. Cook had become a national hero, celebrated for his discoveries and scientific contributions. His violent end seemed a shocking and unworthy fate for a man of his stature. The British public mourned his loss, and artists created numerous paintings and engravings depicting his death, often in highly romanticized ways that portrayed him as a martyr to exploration and progress. In the immediate aftermath, many accounts blamed Hawaiian savagery for Cook's death, reflecting the cultural prejudices of the time. More nuanced interpretations emerged as scholars examined the journals of those who witnessed the events and considered the Hawaiian cultural context. Today, historians recognize that Cook's death resulted from a complex set of circumstances involving cultural misunderstandings, unfortunate timing, and a series of escalating tensions. From a Hawaiian perspective, Cook's return to Kealakekua Bay after the Makahiki Festival may have violated important cultural protocols. The association some Hawaiians made between Cook and the god Lono was complicated by his return at the wrong time in the ritual calendar. Furthermore, the increasing demands of the expedition for provisions and the incidents of theft and violence had created an unstable situation ripe for conflict. Cook himself, normally known for his patience and cultural sensitivity, may have made tactical errors in his handling of the situation. Some historians suggest that he was more tired and irritable during the third voyage than he had been on previous expeditions. Years of arduous exploration, the disappointment of not finding the Northwest Passage, and perhaps concerns about his health may have affected his judgment on that final morning. Whatever the complex causes, Cook's death at Kealakekua Bay marked the end of an extraordinary career that had transformed humanity's understanding of the world. In just over a decade of Pacific exploration, he had charted vast regions previously unknown to Europeans, discovered numerous islands, revolutionized maritime health practices, advanced navigational science, and collected invaluable scientific and cultural information. The manner of Cook's death has sometimes overshadowed the magnitude of his achievements in life, yet there is perhaps a fitting symmetry to his end. He died not in his native England, but in the Pacific that had been the great arena of his explorations. His remains rest in the waters he had charted so carefully, among the islands he had helped to introduce to the wider world. In Hawaiian tradition, the location where Cook fell is marked by a simple white monument visible from the water. For many years, this spot was considered kapu by Hawaiians, in recognition of the powerful forces unleashed that day. Modern visitors to Kealakekua Bay can see this monument and reflect on the complex legacy of contact between cultures that Cook's voyages both exemplified and accelerated. James Cook's death in Hawaii was not merely the end of an individual life, but a symbolic moment in the history of cross-cultural contact in the Pacific. It marked a turning point after which the pace of European engagement with the region would accelerate dramatically. The knowledge Cook had gathered, the routes he had pioneered, and the lands he had described would soon draw traders, missionaries, whalers, and settlers to the Pacific in increasing numbers, forever changing the world he had explored with such care and dedication. Cook did not live to complete his final voyage or to see the impact his discoveries would have on subsequent history. Yet in his meticulous charts, detailed journals, scientific collections, and the innovations in navigation and maritime health he pioneered, he left a legacy that would guide explorers for generations to come. His death at Kealakekwa Bay, on February 14, 1779, ended his personal journey of discovery, but the ripples of his achievements continued to expand across the ocean of history, influencing our understanding of our world to this day. Captain James Cook's voyages transformed not only geographical knowledge, but also made profound contributions across numerous scientific fields. While he is often remembered primarily as an explorer and navigator, Cook's expeditions were unprecedented in their scientific scope and methodology. The careful observations, systematic documentation, and vast collections of specimens and artifacts gathered during his 3 Pacific voyages advanced human knowledge in astronomy, botany, zoology, geology, meteorology, oceanography, and anthropology. From the outset, Cook's voyages differed from previous explorations in their explicit scientific objectives. His first expedition, aboard the Endeavour, was commissioned primarily to observe the 1769 transit of Venus across the Sun from Tahiti. This astronomical event, which occurs in pairs 8 years apart, but then not again for more than a century, was of immense scientific importance. By timing the transit from different points around the globe, astronomers hoped to calculate the distance from Earth to the Sun, a fundamental measurement that would improve understanding of the solar system. Cook's successful observation of the transit at Tahiti, conducted with astronomer Charles Green, was part of a coordinated international scientific effort. Although the results were less precise than hoped due to the optical phenomenon known as the black drop effect, the expedition's astronomical work represented an important contribution to contemporary science. Throughout all 3 voyages, Cook and his scientists continued to make significant astronomical observations, recording eclipses, planetary positions, and stellar phenomena that helped refine navigational tables and astronomical knowledge. Perhaps the most dramatic scientific impact of Cook's voyages came in the field of botany. Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander, the naturalists on the first voyage, collected over 3,000 plant species previously unknown to European science. On the second voyage, Johann Reinhold Forster and his son Georg continued this botanical work, while David Nelson served as botanist on the third expedition. Together, these scientific teams amassed a botanical treasure trove that revolutionized European understanding of Pacific flora. The botanical specimens were not merely collected, they were carefully preserved, catalogued, and documented with scientific precision. Sidney Parkinson, the artist on the first voyage, created more than 900 botanical sketches and paintings, often working frantically as new specimens poured in faster than he could illustrate them. After the specimens reached England, they were studied by leading botanists, incorporated into scientific collections, and in many cases introduced into European gardens and agriculture. Among the notable plant discoveries were numerous species that would later become economically or culturally significant, including varieties of eucalyptus from Australia, breadfruit from Tahiti, and numerous medicinal plants. The comprehensive nature of these botanical collections and their systematic documentation represented a major advance in the scientific understanding of global plant diversity and distribution. Zoological discoveries paralleled the botanical achievements. The expeditions documented numerous animal species previously unknown to European science. The kangaroo, first encountered at Botany Bay during the Endeavour voyage, became perhaps the most famous zoological discovery, but there were countless others, from insects and shellfish to birds and marine mammals. As with the plant collections, these animal discoveries were carefully documented through scientific descriptions and detailed illustrations. William Anderson, who served as surgeon naturalist on the second and third voyages until his death in 1778, made particularly important contributions to zoology. His careful dissections and anatomical studies of newly discovered animals enhanced scientific understanding of comparative anatomy and animal biology. Similarly, the expedition artists created visual records of living animals in their natural habitats, providing valuable information about behavior and ecology. Cook's voyages also advanced geological knowledge significantly. The naturalists collected rock samples, documented volcanic formations, observed coral reef development, and recorded information about soil types and mineral resources. These observations contributed to emerging theories about the formation and structure of the Earth. The discovery and documentation of coral atolls, volcanic islands at different stages of development, and the extensive Great Barrier Reef provided evidence that would later support theories about geological processes and the history of Earth's crust. In oceanography, Cook's expeditions made pioneering contributions. The ships took regular measurements of ocean temperatures, currents, and depths. Cook charted previously unknown features of the Pacific Ocean, documented tidal patterns around various islands, and made observations about sea ice in both the Antarctic and Arctic regions. His careful recordings of ocean conditions established baselines that would be valuable for future scientific studies and practical navigation alike. Meteorological observations formed another important aspect of the Voyage's scientific work. Cook insisted on regular recording of weather conditions, including temperature, barometric pressure, wind direction and strength, cloud formations, and precipitation. These systematic records, maintained across vast stretches of the Pacific through different seasons and years, provided unprecedented data about global weather patterns and contributed to the emerging science of meteorology. The ethnographic and anthropological documentation from Cook's voyages perhaps had the most lasting cultural impact. The expeditions encountered numerous Pacific societies at a pivotal moment, before extensive European contact had transformed their traditional ways of life. Cook himself showed remarkable interest in and respect for the diverse cultures he encountered, documenting their social structures, religious practices, technologies, languages, and material culture. This anthropological work was enhanced by the artists who accompanied the voyages. Sidney Parkinson on the first voyage, William Hodges on the second, and John Webber on the third, created visual records of tremendous value, portraying indigenous peoples, their dwellings, ceremonies, clothing, tools, and daily activities. These visual documents, combined with the detailed written descriptions in journals and reports, created an invaluable record of Pacific cultures at a specific historical moment. The cultural artifacts collected during the voyages, including clothing, tools, weapons, religious items, and art objects, form the basis for important ethnographic collections in Britain. Many of these items were unprecedented in Europe and provided tangible evidence of sophisticated cultural traditions previously unknown or misunderstood. Cook himself took care to document the context and significance of these items, adding greatly to their scientific value. Cook's linguistic documentation also made important contributions to the emerging field of comparative linguistics. He recorded vocabularies from numerous Pacific languages, noting similarities and differences that later helped establish language families and migration patterns. His observations about the relationships between Polynesian languages provided evidence for theories about the settlement of the Pacific Islands and the movements of peoples across the ocean. What made the scientific achievements of Cook's voyages particularly significant was the methodological approach that underpinned them. Cook insisted on careful, systematic observation and documentation. He maintained detailed journals recording not just events, but measurements, conditions, and phenomena. He encouraged similar rigor among his officers and scientific staff. This methodical approach to gathering and preserving knowledge set a new standard for scientific exploration. The integration of different scientific disciplines represented another innovative aspect of Cook's expeditions. The naturalists, astronomers, geographers, artists, and medical personnel worked together, sharing observations and insights. Cook himself participated actively in this scientific work, making astronomical observations, collecting specimens, and documenting phenomena across multiple fields. This multidisciplinary approach enhanced the overall scientific value of the voyages and established a model for future exploration. The dissemination of the scientific findings from Cook's voyages had far-reaching effects. The official accounts of the voyages, published with accompanying illustrations and maps, became bestsellers in Europe, spreading knowledge of Pacific geography, natural history, and cultures to a wide audience. Scientific papers based on expedition findings appeared in journals of the Royal Society and other learned institutions. The botanical and zoological specimens entered scientific collections where they could be studied by researchers, while cultural artifacts enriched museum collections. This widespread dissemination of scientific knowledge from the voyages influenced multiple fields. In natural history, the new plant and animal specimens challenged existing classification systems and contributed to the development of biogeography, the study of the distribution of species across regions. In geology and oceanography, Cook's observations informed emerging theories about the formation of islands and the nature of ocean currents. In anthropology, the detailed records of Pacific cultures provided comparative material that would influence the development of ethnographic methods and cultural theory. Cook's scientific contributions were recognized in his lifetime through his election as a Fellow of the Royal Society and his receipt of the Copley Medal, the Society's highest scientific honor. The medal was awarded specifically for his paper on methods for preserving the health of crews at sea, a practical application of scientific principles that saved countless lives. This recognition reflected the scientific community's appreciation for Cook's methodological rigor and his contributions across multiple fields. The long-term scientific legacy of Cook's voyages extends far beyond his lifetime. The baseline data he and his teams gathered, whether botanical specimens, astronomical observations, ethnographic documentation, or hydrographic measurements, provided reference points for later scientific work. Subsequent explorers and scientists built upon his discoveries, tested his observations, and expanded the knowledge he had begun to systematize. Charles Darwin, sailing on the Beagle more than half a century after Cook, explicitly acknowledged the influence of Cook's voyages on his own scientific work. The tradition of including naturalists and scientists on naval expeditions, which Cook had helped establish, created opportunities for scientific discovery that culminated in Darwin's revolutionary theories. Similarly, later anthropologists, linguists, and ethnographers would return to Cook's accounts as valuable records of Pacific cultures before extensive European influence. Perhaps Cook's greatest scientific contribution was not any single discovery, but rather his demonstration that exploration could be simultaneously practical and scientific, advancing both imperial interests and human knowledge. His voyages showed that careful observation, systematic documentation, and interdisciplinary cooperation could transform our understanding of the world. In doing so, he helped establish an approach to scientific exploration that would influence generations of researchers across multiple fields. Today, the scientific collections, documents, artworks, and artifacts from Cook's voyages remain valuable resources for researchers. The botanical specimens preserved in herbaria, the ethnographic objects in museums, the detailed journals and reports, and the magnificent illustrations continue to yield insights about the Pacific world that Cook explored. This enduring scientific legacy stands alongside his geographical achievements as a testament to the extraordinary impact of his voyages of discovery. The legacy of Captain James Cook extends far beyond the immediate achievements of his 3 great voyages. In the centuries since his death at Kealakekwa Bay, his impact has resonated through geography, science, empire, indigenous histories, and global cultural understanding. Cook's legacy is complex and multifaceted, embracing both remarkable advances in human knowledge and the problematic beginnings of colonial encounters that would transform the Pacific world. Perhaps the most immediate and tangible aspect of Cook's legacy was the geographical knowledge his voyages produced. When he began his Pacific explorations, vast regions of the world's largest ocean remained blank spaces on European maps. By the time of his death, Cook had filled in many of these spaces with remarkably accurate charts and descriptions. He had circumnavigated New Zealand, charted Australia's eastern coastline, explored numerous Pacific archipelagos, and ventured into both the Arctic and Antarctic regions. The precision and reliability of Cook's charts transformed navigation in the Pacific. His detailed maps, showing coastlines, harbours, reefs, and shoals, made travel through previously dangerous or unknown waters much safer. These charts remain standard references for mariners for generations, some continuing in use well into the 20th century. Place names he bestowed, from Cook Strait in New Zealand to Cook Inlet in Alaska, permanently inscribed his presence on the landscape. Beyond simple mapping, Cook resolved several major geographical controversies of his era. His second voyage definitively disproved the existence of a habitable southern continent in the temperate latitudes, while his third voyage demonstrated the practical impossibility of finding a navigable northwest passage with the ships and technology of his time. These findings redirected geographical thinking and maritime endeavours, closing off some theoretical possibilities while opening new avenues for exploration and development. The scientific impact of Cook's voyages constituted another profound aspect of his legacy. The expeditions collected thousands of previously unknown plant and animal specimens, made astronomical observations of unprecedented scope in the Pacific, documented geological formations, and recorded meteorological and oceanographic data across vast stretches of ocean. This scientific bounty enriched European knowledge in multiple disciplines and established new standards for the collection and documentation of natural historical information. The botanical specimens alone represented a major scientific contribution. The thousands of new plant species collected during the voyages expanded known global plant diversity significantly and provided material for taxonomic studies, comparative botany, and practical applications in agriculture, horticulture, and medicine. Similarly, zoological discoveries from Cook's voyages enriched scientific understanding of animal life and distribution across the Pacific region. Cook's expeditions pioneered the integration of scientific inquiry with exploration. By including naturalists, astronomers, artists, and other specialists on his voyages, he established a model that would influence future expeditions, including Charles Darwin's voyage on the Beagle. This approach, combining practical exploration with scientific documentation, represented a significant advance in how humans gathered knowledge about their world. The ethnographic documentation from Cook's voyages provided another enduring legacy. His encounters with diverse Pacific societies occurred at a pivotal historical moment, before extensive European contact had transformed traditional ways of life. The detailed descriptions, illustrations, and collected artifacts from these encounters created an invaluable record of Pacific cultures at a specific point in time. These materials remain significant resources for anthropologists, historians, and indigenous peoples seeking to understand and preserve cultural heritage. Cook's approach to indigenous encounters, while not free from the prejudices of his era, showed greater curiosity and respect than many of his contemporaries demonstrated. He attempted to understand local customs, establish peaceful relations through trade and diplomacy, and prevent unnecessary violence. His journals reveal a man struggling to comprehend cultural differences and often recognizing the sophistication of societies different from his own. This relatively enlightened approach, however imperfect, influenced some later explorers and officials in their cross-cultural encounters. For European imperial powers, particularly Britain, Cook's voyages opened new horizons for expansion. His detailed documentation of resources, harbours, and native populations provided practical information that facilitated later colonization. The claim he made to Australia's eastern coast in 1770, naming it New South Wales, laid the foundation for British settlement there. Within 2 decades of his death, the first fleet would arrive to establish a penal colony at Botany Bay, beginning the European colonization of Australia. Cook's voyages also stimulated commercial interest in the Pacific. His accounts of sea otter populations along the northwest coast of America sparked a lucrative fur trade that would draw American and European traders to the region. His descriptions of sandalwood, pearl shells, and other valuable commodities attracted commercial ventures to various island groups. The maritime routes he pioneered became highways for traders, whalers, and eventually settlers, integrating the Pacific more fully into global economic networks. For the indigenous peoples of the Pacific, Cook's voyages marked the beginning of a profound and often traumatic transformation of their world. Although Cook himself generally sought peaceful relations and fair exchanges, his expeditions initiated or accelerated processes of contact that would have devastating consequences for many Pacific societies. European diseases, for which native populations had no immunity, caused demographic catastrophes on many islands following contact. The crews of Cook's ships unwittingly carried pathogens that would kill far more people than any weapons. Beyond disease, the knowledge Cook's voyages provided to European powers facilitated subsequent colonization, resource extraction, and cultural disruption throughout the Pacific. Islands and continental regions that had developed in relative isolation for millennia were suddenly exposed to new technologies, religions, economic systems, and power structures. The detailed charts, resource inventories, and cultural information in Cook's journals and reports made these places more accessible and exploitable by European interests. The paradox of Cook's legacy lies in this tension between advancement of human knowledge and facilitation of colonial processes that caused immense suffering. His own attitudes and actions, while relatively humane for his time, were still embedded in Enlightenment and imperial frameworks that presumed European superiority and right of access to non-European lands and resources. The claims he made to territories on behalf of Britain reflected these assumptions, despite his personal curiosity about and respect for indigenous cultures. For many indigenous peoples of the Pacific, Cook has become a complex symbol, representing both the scientific achievements of maritime exploration and the beginning of colonial processes that disrupted or destroyed traditional lifeways. In Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and other Pacific societies, reassessments of Cook's legacy have been part of broader decolonial movements, reclaiming indigenous histories and perspectives. Statues of Cook have become focal points for protests against colonial legacies, while indigenous scholars have worked to center native experiences and agency in narratives of early contact. Yet Cook's personal qualities and achievements remain remarkable by any standard. Rising from humble origins through merit rather than privilege, he combined practical seamanship with scientific curiosity and methodological rigor. His navigational feats, crossing the Antarctic Circle, charting New Zealand, navigating the Great Barrier Reef, required exceptional skill and courage. His innovations in preventing scurvy saved countless lives. His detailed journals provide invaluable historical documentation of places, peoples, and natural phenomena. In the naval and maritime world, Cook established new standards for exploration and seamanship. His careful attention to crew health, his meticulous charting methods, his testing of new navigational technologies, and his systematic approach to exploration influenced generations of mariners. Naval officers studied his methods and emulated his leadership style. Many of his protégés, including George Vancouver, William Bligh, and others who had served under him, went on to significant careers of exploration and command, extending his influence well into the 19th century. The cultural impact of Cook's voyages in Europe was profound. The published accounts of his expeditions became bestsellers, captivating the public imagination with descriptions of exotic lands, peoples, and natural wonders. The artistic works produced during the voyages, from Sidney Parkinson's botanical illustrations to William Hodges's magnificent landscapes and John Webber's ethnographic depictions, created powerful visual impressions of the Pacific world for European audiences. These images and narratives shaped European perceptions of the Pacific for generations. In Britain specifically, Cook became a national hero, a symbol of British maritime prowess, scientific advancement, and expanding global influence. His death in Hawaii added a dimension of martyrdom to his reputation, further elevating him in public consciousness. Monuments and memorials to Cook appeared throughout Britain and its colonies. Schools, streets, mountains, bays, and islands were named after him. His image appeared on coins, stamps, paintings, and numerous other commemorative items. The bicentenary of Cook's first voyage in 1968-1971 prompted renewed scholarly and public interest in his achievements. Museums mounted major exhibitions, new biographies appeared, and commemorative events took place around the world. However, this period also coincided with emerging post-colonial perspectives and indigenous rights movements that began to question traditional heroic narratives of exploration and discovery. The resulting debates have enriched understanding of Cook's complex legacy, while challenging simplistic interpretations. Modern scholarship on Cook has increasingly sought to balance recognition of his remarkable achievements with acknowledgement of the problematic aspects of his legacy for indigenous peoples. Historians have worked to incorporate indigenous perspectives and oral histories alongside the European documentary record. They have explored the complexity of early contact situations, recognizing the agency of indigenous peoples in these encounters, rather than portraying them as passive recipients of European influence. For the disciplines of history, anthropology, botany, zoology, geography, and oceanography, Cook's voyages continue to provide valuable primary source material. The specimens, artifacts, journals, charts, and illustrations produced during his expeditions remain important resources for researchers. The baseline data he gathered about Pacific environments, species distributions, cultural practices, and geographical features allows modern scientists to track changes over time and understand historical conditions. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Cook's legacy is the way his voyages expanded human knowledge of our planet. He lifted the veil of mystery from vast regions of the Pacific, replacing speculation with accurate information. He documented biodiversity, cultural diversity, and geographical features previously unknown to European science. He demonstrated that careful observation, systematic documentation, and open-minded inquiry could advance understanding of our world. This expansion of knowledge, for all its complicated consequences, represents a significant chapter in human intellectual history. As we approach the 250th anniversaries of Cook's voyages, his legacy continues to evolve. New generations of scholars, including indigenous researchers, are re-examining the documentary and material evidence from his expeditions through fresh perspectives. Digital technologies are making the journals, artwork, and scientific collections from the voyages more widely accessible than ever before. Cultural institutions in Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and elsewhere are engaging with complex questions about how to present Cook's achievements while acknowledging the problematic aspects of his legacy. James Cook's impact on history transcends simple categorization as hero or villain. His extraordinary skills as a navigator and explorer, his contributions to scientific knowledge, his relatively humane leadership, and his curiosity about different cultures all deserve recognition. Simultaneously, his role in facilitating European colonization, the unintended spread of devastating diseases, and the disruption of indigenous societies must be acknowledged. This complex legacy reflects the broader historical processes of exploration, scientific advancement, cross-cultural encounter, and colonization that have shaped our modern world. What remains undeniable is that Cook changed the world forever. His voyages connected previously separate human societies, expanded the boundaries of known geography, advanced scientific understanding across multiple fields, and set in motion historical processes that continue to reverberate today. For better and worse, the world after James Cook was irrevocably different from the world before him, a testament to the profound impact one remarkable individual can have on human history. As we draw our gentle journey through the life and voyages of Captain James Cook to a close, we find ourselves reflecting on an extraordinary tale of exploration and discovery. From humble beginnings in rural Yorkshire to commanding some of history's most significant voyages of exploration, Cook's life embodied the spirit of curiosity that drives humanity's greatest adventures. The legacy of James Cook extends far beyond the lines he drew on maps or the islands he claimed for Britain. His meticulous approach to navigation and cartography set new standards for accuracy that would guide mariners for generations. His innovations in preserving crew health, particularly his success in preventing scurvy, saved countless lives and transformed maritime practices. His careful observations of Pacific peoples and environments created invaluable records of cultures and ecosystems at a pivotal moment in history. Cook's 3 great voyages expanded the boundaries of European knowledge, replacing speculation with observation and myth with measured reality. He navigated the treacherous waters of New Zealand's coastline, threaded his way through Australia's Great Barrier Reef, ventured further south than any European before him, and explored the frigid waters of the Arctic in search of the Northwest Passage. Along the way, he encountered diverse peoples, from the Maori of New Zealand to the Aboriginal Australians, from the Tahitians to the Hawaiians, establishing patterns of contact that would have profound consequences for all involved. The story of Cook reminds us that human history is rarely simple. The same voyages that advanced scientific knowledge and expanded cultural understanding also opened pathways for colonization and conquest. The careful charts that demonstrated Cook's skill also guided those who would transform the Pacific world, sometimes in ways that brought great suffering to indigenous peoples. Even in his personal story, we find complexity. A man of remarkable achievements who nonetheless met a violent end on a Hawaiian beach, far from the Yorkshire fields where his journey began. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you might imagine yourself aboard the Endeavour or Resolution, feeling the gentle roll of the ship beneath you, hearing the snap of sails in the Pacific breeze, and gazing out at horizons that seem to stretch forever. In those moments between wakefulness and dreams, consider how the quest to know what lies beyond the visible horizon has always driven human exploration, whether across oceans, into the depths of space, or within the mysteries of our own minds. Captain James Cook changed our world forever, filling in blank spaces on maps and expanding human knowledge in ways that continue to resonate centuries after his death. His story reminds us that the spirit of exploration lives within all of us, the desire to see what lies beyond, to understand our world more fully, and to chart courses into the unknown. As your consciousness gently fades into sleep, perhaps you'll carry with you something of Cook's legacy, his curiosity, his courage, his methodical pursuit of knowledge. And in your dreams, may you voyage across peaceful waters to discover new horizons of your own. Good night, dear listener, and sleep well.